Hey guys, today I wanted to talk about something that I don't see come up very often in these online psychological spaces or in these sort of intellectual circles, and that is that confusion is actually the most psychologically harmful feeling that you can experience. Let's dig into it a little bit. While certain feelings, emotions like anger, sadness, they can be very physically damaging. We know that both of those emotions can be pretty tough on the heart, especially. There's one feeling that really hits the hardest right here, and that is confusion. Confusion is very psychologically damaging from a mind and a brain orientation because there is some research about how severe confusion can be seen on brainwaves, and they're starting to uncover the damage that can do. Much like the goat Pokemon Psyduck, we also can damage ourselves if we are too confused. If we experience too much confusion, mental, intellectual, and maybe even emotional confusion, we can hurt ourselves. This happens through sort of immaterial ways. I'm not talking about confusion to the point where you run into a wall and get brain damage, physical brain damage. In that sense, this is more caused through stress inducing cycles, through fractures in attachments, and through issues in basically coalescing a view of the world that provides a stable sense of continuity through time. So, confusion can be really damaging when it comes to our sense of reality. I mean, confusion can really lead to these, what we consider like very severe mental illnesses like schizophrenia, um, severe bipolar, a lot of these things where someone's connection to reality seems severed in some meaningful way. That is confusion, at least in the sense that I'm talking about. So, confusion can be seen in a lot of ways. There are some other ways it can be seen. I mean, obviously, we see it when it rises to the level of a diagnosable condition, but it can be seen in a lot of other ways too. So, some of the more discrete ways that we see this show up psychologically is in things like identity dissolution or malformation. When one goes to produce their identity and they become severely confused through mixed messages, trauma, harmful experiences, confusing outcomes, a lot of negative feedback from others or conflicting feedback from others. Basically, when we exist in a state of severe conflict between what we expect and what actually happens, and this can be true for attachment too. So, I'm going to make a longer video about how this confusion plays out through interactions with the caregiver. There's this really cool framework called the double bind procedure, and I am planning on making a longer video about that. It's very interesting. I love it a lot, but that will take some more time, so I'll get into that in a little bit. But this concept that if we have very conflicting information, whether that information is coming directly through someone stating something that is in conflict with something that we can directly experience, a parent saying they love you when they're actively harming you. When confusion spreads out into other areas and we're not so sure who we are, we're not so sure about the world, we're not so sure about the predictability of our environment and also our internal experience. Things seem to happen at random, they pop out at us. Our experiences seem to come from really the void. I mean, it just experiences, feelings, emotions, our own actions just kind of pop up. It's deeply confusing. And that detachment, when it worsens, can lead to some really bad conditions. There's some other ways it shows up as well. So, severe paranoia. This is, in a sense, a form of confusion. So, if you are experiencing really unwarranted paranoia, this can be very harmful. People that have experienced like drug induced psychosis or who have gone on benders, on like methamphetamines, things like that, they will know what this paranoia feels like and they know acutely how damaging that is to the psyche and what that does to the brain. You can feel a sort of strike that happens in the brain matter when you reach this severe paranoid state when you come back down from it, at least. I already talked about attachment and relationship confusion. So, when we have confusing relationships and our sense of self in our social spheres, our place in our environment becomes questionable, that can be pretty damaging psychologically as well. It can cause us to feel sort of unmoored and without a foundation or a base. Which also ties into identity and attachment, of course. Really, there is just this general confusion. And we do see this intellectually. So, like, there's some connection between the level of education one has, both in the sort of modern terms of education of like things you've remembered and stuff but what I mean really is like education in terms of how to think properly, how to process your emotions, like psychoeducation, social emotional learning, things like that. That's why a lot of schools are pushing that curriculum a lot more. It is very valuable in a lot of different ways to know how to think, not just what to think. Education can be a very strong intervening factor that sort of calms down the level of confusion that one can even be exposed to because they have the tools. They're equipped with the ability to think through their experiences in a methodical, rational way, which kind of takes away a lot of this cloud of confusion that hangs over someone. Education intelligence is very important in that sense, in a sense of clearing out the space and helping really bring clarity to one's experience. And that clarity cuts through the confusion. I really see like a sense of clarity in opposition to a sense of confusion. There's actually this cool research paper from China about how when there is resting confusion in the brain, it actually increases the production of dreams in the sleeping brain. So, dreams are a process of helping clear out confusion that your sort of unconscious brain does when you're sleeping. So even the brain knows that it's important to clear out some of that confusion for its own health. Basically, and I'll get into this a little bit more when I talk about the double bind, but I have this framework of entropy when it comes to mental health. And in my view, confusion heightens entropy in the brain more than any other feeling. And so, in my framework, at least, in this concept of entropy of brain, in that the brain can become highly entropic and you can experience some of these very externalizing, concerning experiences or what we can eventually, diagnose as a condition or very, very low entropy, which might appear as a sort of catatonia or depression. I'll get into that more. That's a whole framework I've got to dive into. But basically, confusion heightens the entropy in the brain, which worsens one's experience, makes it more frenetic, makes it more energized, but not necessarily in a positive way. In the physical sense, that if you see a solid and you look at the atoms, imagine you're in third grade and you're seeing the outline, of all the atoms in a solid, and they're staying mostly still. And then you look at a gas and they are just bouncing all over the place at really high speeds, crashing into each other. That's sort of how I view the brain. When we heighten entropy in the brain, we increase collisions, we increase risk, we increase problems, and it takes things like meditation, attachment, calmness, peace to bring that back down and find a level state that we can operate from in a healthy way. That's just what I wanted to talk about today in terms of confusion. It's really important, not talked about too much, can be very damaging if we don't sort of pay attention to it and do what we need to prevent that confusion from really clouding our experience. Try to find that clarity as best you can. Thanks for watching, everyone.